Melody writing can feel intimidating, like it's some mysterious skill you either have or you don't. You listen to the greats, John Williams, Howard Shore, Hans Zimmer, and they seem to produce melody after melody after melody that is so impressionable and so memorable. And then we sit down to write and we struggle with that. Well, why? Today, we're going to talk about some techniques that you can use in your compositions that can help to elevate your melodies. Stick around and find out. Okay, so the first thing that we need to do is establish exactly what role our melody is going to play in our music. In a previous video, I had said that harmony sort of functions like the lighting in the room. It's there to sort of help and set the tone and add some sort of detail, right? Well, if harmony is the lighting, right, your melody is the same thing as, say, the main character or the actor standing on the center of the stage. And our melody, right, the way that we move the melody around sort of functions the same way that we might move a character around on a stage or in a scene, right? And there are certain ways that we can do that, that their actions and their motion becomes very compelling in helping to aid in the narrative that they're trying to tell. Okay. So, we're going to talk about a couple of different things, and then we're also going to look at a few different examples, specifically from Howard Shore's score to the Lord of the Rings trilogy. It is an iconic score and easily one of the best examples of really, really good use of melody in narrative. So, here we go. Okay. So, we're going to just talk about a couple of concepts. I'll give you a couple of examples of sort of bad melody writing and then ways that we can use it. And I'll give you an example. Like I said, two examples from Lord of the Rings, and we'll talk about how those melodies work. And then I'll actually give you an example of a piece that I wrote for a client. Okay. So, here we go. Let's come up with a bad melody, right? We're going to write in the key of C for right now. Okay. We'll call that my melody. I think that was what I did the first time, right? One more. Okay. All right. And so now if we look closely at this melody, right? I'm moving mostly in intervals of thirds, right? So that would mean if I were to stay on the same pitch, that would be a first, right? If I move stepwise, we call that stepwise or a second, right? This would be a third, a fourth, a fifth, a sixth, seventh, an octave, right? So, okay, that melody is fine, right? Functionally and harmonically, there is something going on, right? Uh, Something like that, right? Very sort of 1/5 kind of motion, right? But in terms of storytelling or narrative, there's not really a lot happening, right? It kind of goes up and it comes back down, it goes up and it comes back down, it goes up and it comes back down. But it doesn't go anywhere. It feels like it's just sort of wandering. Okay. And regardless of the way that we are trying to tell our story, our melody needs to be intentional in the direction that it moves. Right. So there's a lot of folks who argue that, and I think this is an accurate point, that as your melody starts to move up, right, there's almost like this sort of question element to it, right? Right? So that would be E.T., right? John Williams, E.T. Okay? Right? And that's another good example of a melody that wants to just sort of keep going, right? And in the context of the story, we're reaching into outer space and, the ET is actually he's going. So I mean, I could spend a whole video talking about just that melody alone, right? But the way the melody moves is sort of helping to aid the story. It's not just wandering. It's not just right. That to me sounds very much like a fourth grade band piece, right? Those four pitches sound like Jurassic Park. It's because right? Because it is. Um, but uh, we want to make sure that our melody has direction. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the Lord of the Rings, because I think that it will give you a good example of how being intentional about how things move help. Right. So the first one of these tracks that I'm going to use to explain is called Concerning Hobbits, right? And it's the main theme for the Shire. If you haven't seen the movies, stop watching this video right now and go watch them and come back afterwards. Your life will be changed, and it will be better for it. Okay, but the Hobbit theme or the Shire theme sounds like this, right? Okay, and if we look at just the beginning of that, right? That's the same notes that I used in the melody example that I gave you earlier. Something like that, right? But why is it that that melody that I wrote doesn't work and this one does? Why does that one work so well, right? Well, let's put it a little bit into context, right? So the hobbits are supposed to be these sort of simple people. They don't want to leave home. They like to sit around all day and eat and drink and smoke their pipes and be merry, right? Excuse me. Um, and they want to stay home, right? They want to stay home. Okay. Um, and as the story progresses, right, we find out that so many times Sam and Frodo and Merry and Pippin and everybody really, but specifically the hobbits are talking about, man, I really wish that I was back in the Shire, right? And so this melody does a good job of making us feel like we want to go home, right? Home being our tonic pitch or the key of C or the note C, right? And so if we listen to the first phrase of that melody, right, we're immediately right back home and it feels very satisfying, right? The next phrase, we've now ventured further away from home. That's the farthest we've gotten, right? So we started at C, the first phrase only goes to G, now we're at A, right? And now we're back home again. Right? And we're back again on that same pitch, right? So the melody is doing what the characters are doing. It's feeling what the characters are feeling and experiencing in the same way, right? They start their journey just at home, right? They're at home. And then they're challenged to venture away. Mr. Frodo, this is the farthest from home I've ever been. There's still this pull to come back home. Right? And we always land back home, right? So in terms of melody writing and contour, there's this up and down, right? But the contour finds its resolution back where it started, okay? Which again is very indicative of what happens in the actual narrative of the story, right? So here's another example of this, and I'm gonna open up, or I'm gonna show you rather my screen here for a minute. Let me get rid of that just so that you can see the instrument that I'm using, because this is a great fun little it's open on a screen that you can't see. That's okay. I'll just tell you what it is. This is a Cinesamples instrument. It's a 12-horn articulation, and I can actually control those articulations using my sustain pedal. So if my foot is up, we have staccatos, and if I put my foot down, we have legatos. Okay, so I'm going to play this, and if there's wrong articulations because I'm doing it live, and I'm not going to go and be able to line the MIDI up, right? So it sounds like this. I'm sure you will recognize it. Okay, so what a powerful, huge melody, right? And this is a good example of somewhere that orchestration really matters, and we'll get into orchestration in a future video, right? But let's talk about why this melody works, right? So this melody is the theme for at least it starts as the theme for the Fellowship, right? So it's Frodo and his companions as they go off to Mordor. Okay, and the melody starts in a lot of ways very similarly to how the Shire theme does. Sorry, I'm gonna switch back to using the piano for right now, just for a minute, right? So, right, we're at home. We're still home. We're in the key of D. Okay, and now we start to have this reach, right? We start to have this upward stretch. Okay, and that upward stretch is supposed to and does signify this idea of heroism, right? And longing and reaching and wanting more, right? And then we have a repeat of it. This one, though, you'll notice doesn't resolve, right? This melody ends up on the fifth, right? Which is sort of like this ongoing open question. It's okay, well, what's going to happen next? And it's leaving that hopefulness behind everything that they do, right? So this is a really powerful example of ways that that the way that a melody is structured, or the pitches that you start on or end on, or specific phrases start or end on, can really help in the narrative, right? If that melody was like, that feels a little too conclusive, and in the story it's not that conclusive, right? So these are just a couple examples of how Howard Shore really brilliantly uses melodic contour to help to tell the story. Okay, so I'm going to give you one more example, and this is a melody that I wrote, like I said, for a client. I can't talk too much about it. It's a game that hasn't been released yet, but I am allowed to share this with you a little bit. So the melody goes like this. I'll just play it first, and then we'll talk. Okay, so it's a little bit longer, but it is a sci-fi game largely inspired by Star Trek, right? And so there is this idea of this forward reach, this, I'm going to venture into space, and I'm constantly pushing the boundaries of what and where I've been before, right? And so if we look at the structure of this melody, right? The second phrase, right? Similarly to The Hobbit, right? Right? That second phrase is the farthest we've been from home. Same thing is true here, right? Right? Each moment in that phrase, we get a little further, right? Or each phrase, sorry, moment in the phrase. You know what I'm trying to say, right? Each one of those little phrases, we're further and further and further from our stable tonic pitch. Again, we keep going, right? Right? And while we end on the tonic pitch, we ended an octave higher than where it started, right? Right? So every phrase steps a little bit further and a little bit further and a little bit further and a little bit further, right? And then finally we end further from where we started. All right, everyone. I hope that this video gave you some new ideas. Go get some practice in, and then bring what you're working on over to our school community on Skool.com. It's the best place to share your progress, get feedback from the group, and really dial in your sound. I'll see you there.